Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I want to talk about chemistry and why so many of us have been misled when it comes to chemistry and how we often misinterpret what it even means. And I want to start by saying that so many of us have a lot of different wiring and conditioning that has prepared us for this in one way or another when it comes to love and relationships, that we are looking for the intensity and we are mixing the feelings of intensity with the real thing. Okay, but we're gonna go more into depth with this. We're gonna draw two magnets. So here is what is happening, guys. This is two magnets. And this is what we call chemistry. But what the chemistry actually is, what does it even mean? Just to make it more obvious, this is magnets, magnetic pool. So let's start by saying that so many of us grew up in an environment where there were these intense feelings very much highlighted, and we grew up in an environment and homes and houses where there was a lot of intensity going on in the background. Why is that? Because many of our caregivers, many of our parents, many of the previous generations didn't grow up with the emotional availability or the emotional understanding as we do have today. Many of our parents did just don't know better, and they were operating in the field of following what was set out for them. So for example, if they had a strong chemistry with someone, they perceived that as love, as the meant to be, as something that we're destined to be. And we can also thank our environment and our entertainment industry for this, because as we can see in a lot of the movies, there is often portrayed this chemistry, strong chemistry, an amazing starter to incredible relationship that starts kind of on the rocks, where people have to go through different challenges and overcome different obstacles to get to the final destination where they are just happily in love and happy ever after. And don't get me wrong, we don't want to completely dissolve chemistry. Chemistry is still important one way or another to even be with someone, but chemistry should not be the first and foremost thing that we are looking at when we are trying to build life with someone, when we are trying to build a relationship with someone, when we are trying to build a home and a safe space with someone. This is what we have been led to believe, that the chemistry, the intense emotional roller coaster and the feeling of high and low is something that we should pursue and something that equals love. But we want to go deeper into this, actually what this chemistry even is, what does it mean, and how we can navigate that if we experience this strong pull towards someone, if we experience this strong chemistry, this strong activation, as I like to call it as well. So on this channel we would call it activation, because sometime in most cases this chemistry, this intense chemistry, this intense roller coaster, these intense highs and lows are just activation of something that is very familiar to us, and that familiar came to us from our wiring, from our childhood, from our upbringing, as we are always talking on this channel. So I want to go deeper into this. So now we're going to remove this chemistry. Actually, we're going to keep this drawing, we're going to remove activation as well. So the familiarity, The familiarity is often behind the strong feeling of a chemistry. And as we can imagine it here, imagine there is a strong pull, there are these magnets, but there is a hand behind the scenes. So sorry guys, but I really cannot draw a hand, so let's say this is a hand. There is a hand pulling the strings. I mean, did I make 5 fingers? At least I made 5 fingers. Bear with me. There is a string that is pulling these magnets behind the scenes. What does it mean? That we are operating from what is familiar to us. So often these intense feelings are based on what was wired for us. And what do I mean by that? So, for example, you grew up in an environment, you grew up in a family where your mother and father were constantly in conflict, push and pull dynamics, or they were constantly in this chaos, triggering each other, navigating that, getting back to each other, triggering each other. So this roller coaster, this very, very intense up and down movements and feelings of high intense emotions are gonna feel super familiar to your nervous system. Okay, so again, we are getting back to the basic. So as we know on this channel, I believe if you are following this channel, you would already know by now that the nervous system is wired for some baseline, and that comes from our childhood. If you are the first time ever hearing about the nervous system, welcome to the channel. You have a lot of work to do. I'm just joking. But we want to make the nervous system safe with what we want to receive and what we want to experience, okay, at the end of the day. So whatever is familiar to us, whatever was wired in us as the blueprint, as the childhood manual that we received, whether it was preferred or not preferred, that's gonna come with us in our adulthood, and we're gonna be attracting similar patterns, similar relationships, similar dynamics into our life. And whether you like it or not, it's gonna play out, because this is happening on the subconscious level, where our subconscious is trying to bring us back to the basis, to the things that we haven't dealt with, perhaps that we haven't addressed, that we wired as the norm and the familiar. That's going to bring us towards, and even though consciously you might be thinking, oh, I would never be with the men like my mother chose for herself. I would never be with this avoidant attachment style with the man who is just working, not paying attention to me, or something like that. But then you say that logically, and at the end of the day, you might end up with the exact pattern, with the exact relationship pattern, even though at the beginning maybe you didn't see that, because the subconscious level is operating all the time 24/7, and at the beginning maybe someone is putting on some kind of mask or something like that. But after a while these patterns will come up, and more often than not you're gonna play the exact roles to each other where you are triggering your biggest wound. And why is this happening? Because this is offering us the biggest healing potential and the evolution of our soul, of our being. But not everyone is on that level where they understand it and they are aware of that. And most of all, some of us might be aware of that because we might be educated on this. We might be reading some kind of books or psychological stuff. But then when it comes to actually working on that or changing that, we are not willing to do the work. And that's why those relationships end up not working out anyway. Right? So what we want to do here essentially is not just to understand these dynamics, but to be willing and open to change those patterns, to change those wirings, and to change essentially the outcome. And as we know, like these two magnets, as we know, it takes two to tango. So there's two of us in this game, in this play. Both of the people have to be willing to do the work or be brutally honest with themselves. And I was talking about this also in the video about the shadow, So both of us have to be willing to face our wounds, face our shadows, face our shortcomings, and be completely and ruthlessly honest for this to work. Otherwise, it's not gonna work and the relationship will end in not working out. Quite literally, right? So that's what we want to do here. The nervous system will always choose the familiar. And if your wiring is for chaos, drama, neglect, even abuse, that's what you're gonna attract to your life, right? So that's where we want to address it, in the root cause, in the very beginning, in our childhood. Now we're gonna be talking about this a bit more. Let's talk a little bit more about the intensity. Let's say this is a roller coaster. It's a very strange roller coaster, but bear with me. Okay, so let's say this is a roller coaster. I hope it looks slightly like a roller coaster. The intensity is what kind of lures us in, okay? The intensity is what lures us in. And why does it happen in the first place? Because many of us have the wrong idea of what it means to be feeling deep emotions. So like I was saying before, we have a lot of programming that we receive from the movies, from the cartoons, from the stories, from the upbringing, where there is always this notion that makes us feel like this love, this relationship, this connection has to be something really, really deeply intense, to the point where we experience lots of ups and downs. And don't get me wrong right now, because when we are talking about love, when we are talking about the sacred union, of course it is very deep. I'm not trying to downplay the feeling of love, obviously, for the love of God. What I'm trying to say is that it often masks itself as these really, really high ups and then the lowest lows, okay? Or it is this push and pull dynamics, and it gets to the point where it becomes toxic. Okay, so nothing about this push and pull, playing games, or experiencing complete highs and then the lowest lows, where to the point where you reach your rock bottom, is romance, is love. This is the idea that we received from our conditioning and from our wounding, that we believe that in order to have something real, we need to go through these very intense emotional states. And that's just not the truth, because the real love, the real connection, of course it's gonna have some ups and downs, but you're not gonna feel like you are losing ground beneath you when you are having an argument with your partner, or when you are having a misunderstanding with your partner. You're not gonna feel these deeply, in one way or another, threatening feelings that make you question your whole existence and make you feel the ground is breaking underneath you because you don't know where you stand with this person, okay? So it's very different emotion, very different feeling. This intensity, very high ups and very deep lows, are sign that what you are in is not the divine relationship, the divine love that you came here to experience. It might as well be some karmic lesson or a toxic dynamic that you are entertaining, and you might be repeating your childhood wiring. So if that reminds you of the relationship of your caregivers or something that you experienced in your childhood, then this might be the case, and it's coming up for you in order for you to look at it, to move through that, and to stop entertaining that, and to rewire your nervous system, so you understand that the safety is the most important thing when it comes to relationship. Okay, so it's not actually the intensity of the feelings, it's the safety. is the safety. And trust me when I tell you, it's gonna feel very unfamiliar to you if what you experienced in your childhood was anything but safe. If you experience this roller coaster and this chaos and this drama, then safety is gonna feel very unfamiliar. And to the point where you might feel that when someone is a safe person, when you meet someone and you feel like this person is safe, you might even consider it boring, right? Because you don't get these butterflies, you don't get these high, intense, overwhelming feelings where we get intoxicated by it. So many people get intoxicated by it, so they just keep jumping from relationship to relationship because of the novelty of the relationship. It is very intense, right? We all been through that. When you meet someone for the first time and you have this chemistry and you have this intensity and you have all these roller coasters, ups and downs, it's very, very intoxicating to the point where you might even lose yourself in a process for a bit. But when it is something really safe and really good for you, it's gonna feel unfamiliar for your nervous system in the beginning. And at the same time, it feels very subjective to talk about it because people often say that when you know, you know. And this is a tricky sentence because sometimes you think you know, and it's just your nervous system reacting to the old pattern or to the old wiring, right? But if you really know, you know, and that comes from something deeper, it doesn't come from the overwhelming intoxication and the emotional roller coaster. It's just the deep knowing that you get. But yes, this video is looking at why are we entertaining it. Let's look at that. So guys, you knew it. We're gonna be going back to the childhood. So why are we even entertaining these highs, ups and downs, lows, this chemistry? Because it comes from our childhood, like I said before, and now we want to draw the house. But this time, to make it more dramatic and to make it more memorable for you, this house is actually on fire, okay? So there is flames all over this house. The house is on fire. And this is you. This is home. So let's make it even more dramatic. Not dramatic in a sense, but just to make it memorable, you know? So you remember my drawing. I think it should be this color. Hopefully this looks like fire. Yes, so the house is on fire. This house is on fire. And why are we talking about this? Basically what I said before, when you grew up in an environment where these feelings, these high emotions, these intense feelings were present, you will consider them as home and familiar. And what do we do with what's familiar? We repeat the same pattern, we repeat the same wiring, we repeat the same relationship, we repeat everything because it's wired inside of our nervous system. Our nervous system perceives this as safe, even though the whole house is on fire. It's anything but safe. The whole house is burning. Everything is in the fires. But you perceive it as safety. Therefore, you will recreate the same pattern over and over again. So you might attract this person and you might think this is amazing, this is my person, while you feel very familiar with them. Yet in the background, there is a huge fire alarm going off, but you don't realize it because to your nervous system, there is no alarm. There is only familiarity because it was wired that this is your norm. So the whole point of this work lies in rewiring what's familiar, making the unfamiliar familiar, and the unfamiliar familiar. So for example, this danger, this emotional roller coaster was familiar to you. So what we want to do, we want to wire in this safety the quote-unquote boring, the calm. We want to make it familiar so we can remain in that relationship, in that pattern, in that connection without running away and setting the whole place on fire, because we are looking for the drama, we are looking for the chaos, we are looking to recreate the safety that we have perceived in our home. So even though when the house is on fire, we feel safe in it. So we really need to start to be looking where we are not in touch with our own true self, because this wiring is going to feel like a very, very true and honest thing, because if you don't know better, you cannot do better. Until you know better, you cannot do better. So now if you know better, now you can do better. You can rewire it, you can change it, you can move it. And that's why, guys, I'm always repeating this, but I will always repeat it for the rest of my days, I hope so, that there is nothing set in stone in this world, in this game, in this place, okay? Everything is an open canvas. And if you grew up in this really, really fiery home, fiery place, that doesn't bound you to stay in that for the rest of your life. It doesn't bound you to recreate that familiar setting for your own family. Quite the opposite. It gives you the exact opportunity to choose differently and to do the right thing for you, what you actually want. So we want to be asking ourselves, what do we actually want? Do we want to be in this place with fire? Some people would still choose that because they are not aware of that. They're still going to choose that. At the end of the day, they are not aware, so they will just default to that setting. But you know better. And even though if you have this wiring, you can still choose and go against it, okay? It's going to take a lot of repetition. It's going to take a bit of work, but it is absolutely possible. No one can tell me otherwise. It is absolutely possible. I am the proof of that. My clients are proof of that. And you will be one of us because you are watching this and I know it and I trust in you and I believe in you. It just depends on what you choose. And I know you're watching this video, you already made that decision, so you just have to stand behind it, okay? So the familiar needs to be rewired. Now we have two doors. This door is peace, and this door is chemistry. We are here and we are walking, we are walking towards chemistry. That's what most of us do. And why do we do that? Because, like we were saying and talking before, the peace feels kind of boring to us. It feels too calm, too boring, too quiet. Whereas the chemistry is this magnetic pull and is this activation. Like I was saying in the first slides, where the magnets are activated together and there is this invisible string with this amazing hand drawing that I made. Probably my best drawing so far. Amazing. So we choose the chemistry because we feel that activation, that magnetic pull, and that activation is our wound actually activated. It's our triggers, it's our wounding, it's our childhood blueprint that we are walking towards because that's familiar to us, okay? Again, familiar. And this is unknown. This is unknown. That's why it feels boring. That's why it feels like, oh, there is no sparks, there is no chemistry, there is nothing. Because it's so safe, it's so calm, it's so peaceful. I'm not used to that. I would rather go towards that action. I would rather go towards the drama. I would rather go towards the chaos. This is all happening subconsciously, right? Even maybe consciously for someone. We would choose the same hell, the same suffering instead of actually choosing peace for us, because the peace we deem boring. We feel like we don't know it, we don't know how to navigate that. It's uncomfortable to navigate situation where you are not comfortable with, right? It's like when you get a new job. The first few days you don't know what the hell you are doing, even though you have the school or you have the diploma, blah, 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 blah. But nothing prepares you for actually being in that job, doing that job, right? All of us feel a bit weird, a bit awkward. Oh, it's unfamiliar, I don't know how to navigate that. Whereas when you are in your job for years and years, you know exactly what you're doing. You are in the routine, you are in the stereotype. It feels, in a way, it feels boring, right? It feels like you already know what you're doing. You are not stressed, you are not anxious about that. Unless the work is super stressful, but that's a different thing. But I'm talking about the first getting to know the job, right? So it's the similar situation. We will go towards the familiar, even though it's hell, even though it's the house on fire, even though we know we're gonna suffer, even though deep down we know it's not right for us. But this deep conditioning, the conditioning is always gonna overrun our logic. When we want to choose peace, we want to be at peace, our subconscious mind doesn't care. It wants to be with the familiar, with the safe, right? So again, we are getting back to the subconscious mind. We need to work daily on the subconscious mind to rewire all those patterns. And some of us never worked on it for the whole years of our life, or who knows how many years, but it's never too late. Okay, don't get me wrong, it's never too late. Today is a perfect day to start. If you're just starting, welcome. Please join us, because this work is mind-blowing and life-changing. I promise you that. So there is no wrong move. The only wrong move is the move that you don't make. Okay, so now we get that done. Also, this is why we sabotage if we choose peace. If we somehow went with it, with the peace, we might end up sabotaging it, because still our wiring is stronger than our logic. And there is one question for you, very interesting question. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you deemed something boring just because it didn't trigger you enough? This is a good one, right? I want you just to think about it, and if you feel, drop it in the comments so we can have a discussion. But so many of us, once we reach this point where we are actually at peace, we suddenly feel like, oh, it's so boring, because there is no drama, there is no action, there is no constant push and pull, there is no constant high and low. Wow, suddenly we don't know how to navigate that. So that's why we sabotage it. That's why we feel like, oh, this is maybe not the right thing. This is not entertaining enough. We are strange beings. Now. And now, my dears, we're gonna talk about the difference between love and activation. So I'm gonna draw. Wow, this is really weird, but this should be a mask. Okay, so this is a mask. That's love. And underneath is activation. Love should be red. What do I want to say here is that all of this, what we're talking about in this video, doesn't mean that love has to be boring. It doesn't mean that there is no chemistry in real love. It doesn't mean that there is no high and low intensity of feelings, okay? But there is a real difference when it comes to the real thing and when it comes to the activation of the wounds. And even the real love is going to activate your wounds in one way or another, okay, as we were talking in the shadow. But sometimes you will feel and find yourself in situations where you are literally just recreating the same old patterns, the toxic behaviors, and you are recreating the drama, the chaos, and those wounds. Also, I want to make it very clear that in any sort of connection, you can make the decision for the real thing if both of you in the equation are willing to look at it, okay? So not to make it seem like, okay, this is really bad, this is black and white, this is it, right? Nothing in life is black and white. But if you find yourself in a connection where you are literally suffering, you are trying to change the situation, you are trying to navigate it, you think it's the real love, but the other person is just taking advantage, of course, that's not the real thing. That's not gonna change anything. You can do so much work and you cannot change the other person. So this is important. Both of the parties has to be willing to look at those wounds, look at those activations and work on that. That's the main criteria for this to work. So how you find the real thing, actually, not based on the chemistry, not based on the intensity, not based on chaos, not based on the familiar and your upbringing. When you yourself feel like this is on some level beneficial for you, good for you, and the other person as well, okay? So that has to be mutual agreement where you both agree on this and also on this work that comes with it, okay? And absolutely there is chemistry, and the chemistry gets much better when you start healing your wounds, start looking at those things, start opening yourself up for more intimacy, because you stop putting walls between you and the person. And the more you get to know them, the more incredible it's gonna feel like, okay? So I don't want you to get discouraged, like, okay, so love has to be this boring, mundane thing. It absolutely does not. It's all up to you. You can create whatever you want and like. But the underground feeling, the whole structure of this should be safety and familiarity. And then, of course, you can build upon it, make it interesting, make it adventurous, make it unique, make it yours. It's absolutely and completely possible. But don't get swayed by these movie stories and anything where they make you feel like you have to go extreme depths and distances to feel something, and to feel this intense push and pull emotion and play this game and whatever they are telling us, okay? Real love is simple. It does take work, but it's simple and it is safe. It needs to feel safe. Some question for you at the end. I want you to ask yourself, does this connection make me more stable or unsteady? How you can know if you're in the right connection, okay? Does this person make me feel more myself, or do I have to perform more? Does this connection make me feel more grounded or scattered? And at the end, I would just like to close this with an open question. Do you guys think that chemistry is a sign or a warning? What do you think? What is your take on this? Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.